When the early explorers first gazed upon that part of the Pacific Northwest, which is now the state of Washington, they saw a picturesque lake such as Lake Chelan in central Washington, which we now behold, peacefully reflecting the blue of heaven and suggesting the familiar expression that refers to this part of the world as the land of the sky blue water. And along with the beautiful lakes and the streams, they saw snow-covered mountains like Mount Rainier, appearing the same now as it did then. And they saw thundering waterfalls like Snoqualmie. But what the early explorers did not see, and probably never dreamed of seeing, was the magic metropolis of Seattle, gateway to the Pacific Northwest and one of the wonder cities of the world. The story of Seattle reads like a tale from the Arabian Nights. For only 60 years ago, it was a remote little village with about 1,000 inhabitants, developing a slow but steady growth through the lumber industry. But in 1897, the discovery of gold in Alaska and the Yukon changed it almost overnight into an important commercial center. Being the nearest United States port to the Orient and to Alaska, Seattle is a natural receiving and distributing point for Trans-Pacific and Alaska traffic, and it affords easy access to Atlantic and Gulf markets. The opening of the Panama Canal and the years of the World War, when Seattle built more ships than any other United States port, also added greatly to the city's rapid growth, so that today Seattle, with almost 500,000 inhabitants, is the largest city of its age in the world. Some idea of its recent growth is illustrated in the fact that building permits in the 9 years following the World War represented values averaging $23 million per year. In the span of 60 years, therefore, Seattle has grown from an obscure trading post to a cosmopolitan city with many miles of paved streets and scenic boulevards, numerous churches, parks, and public schools, and many publicly owned port terminals and industrial establishments. Although the discovery of gold was the first great boom to the material growth of Seattle, the substantial old staple that has consistently stimulated its development from the beginning is lumber. And with this thought in mind, let us fly from the city that the lumber industry nursed and fondled out into the open spaces of the evergreen state, where the cedars, hemlocks, and Douglas firs are still growing abundantly, thanks to the intelligent supervision of the Washington lumbermen, who plant several young trees for every old one that is cut down. And here we transfer from our plane to an automobile, which takes us over picturesque highways, typical of Washington State, where wildflowers and indigenous plant life abound in profusion, sheltered by the majestic trees that tower above. At the world-famous Weyerhaeuser lumber camp between Longview and Tacoma, lumber capital of the world, we witnessed the passing of a forest giant which is destined for the commercial marts of mankind. An outstanding contribution to modern logging is the power saw, which makes the felling of any size tree a comparatively simple operation. And now that the great giant takes its last look into the sky that has given it sunshine and rain for the past century or more, and down it comes. So the mighty has fallen. The lumbermen in this part of the world are as much concerned about the growing of a young tree as they are about the cutting of an old one. And in addition to this, they devote considerable time to protecting their forests from fire and blight, so that the reforestation and preservation of Washington's great forests is a responsibility voluntarily assumed by the lumber industry itself. In time, these monarchs of the forest may be the masts of some great ship, or the support of telephone wires, or perhaps part of the lumber that goes into somebody's new home. And now we are back in our transport plane, flying over the busy port of Everett, which shares with the larger Washington cities of Tacoma and Bellingham the reputation of being one of the world's greatest lumber ports. Returning to Seattle, our plane brings us down at the city's airport, near which is one of the largest airplane manufacturing concerns in the country. A particular type of lumber known as Sitka spruce, which grows abundantly in Washington, was a choice premier wood for airplane construction, and thus again lumber was largely responsible for attracting a great modern industry to the evergreen state, even though today most planes are made of metal. Before leaving Seattle, it is fitting that we should give a thought to educational, cultural, and physical development, as they represent the final stages in the progress of any community. And in this respect, Seattle points with pride to her co-educational University of Washington State, where over 12,000 students are now obtaining the benefits of the most modern educational and physical training. And it is here that we meet the world-famous rowing crew of the university, Olympic champions, as well as champions of clean sport and fair play. The record of the successive crews who have trained in these waters has been unexcelled by any other rowing crew. And graduate oarsmen from Washington University now coach the crews of the foremost colleges of the United States. The success of the Washington crew is due to what is known as the Washington stroke. And oddly enough, this stroke was invented by Hiram Carnibar, former coach at Washington University, who was not an oarsman himself, but worked out the stroke by theory. A natural feature which may also contribute to the rowing ability of the Washington University crews is the location of Seattle in the midst of numerous lakes and convenient waterways, all tending to arouse and encourage the pursuit of aquatic sportsmanship. In our final glimpses of Seattle, we as Americans from other states join with the citizens of this typically American city in sincerely praising the record of its development, and we leave it wishing more power to it, for it is one of the four vital portals of our country, this Seattle, gateway to the Pacific Northwest and the pride of Washington State.